So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Alice to introduce the item, and yeah, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So the proposed work plan is included in the agenda pack. Just to sort of update the committee on a couple of actions from the June meeting. So the adult exploitation and modern slavery item has been scheduled in, and as the tourism item, that sort of discussion about the date is in progress. The forward plan was updated after the scrutiny agenda was published. There were 2 cabinet reports added to the August cabinet meeting, but it's not recommended that scrutiny looks at those, as there's no real scope for meaningful input. Those reports for your information related to a report on disposal of land and an asbestos surveying and air monitoring contract. This would mean that there's no business for the August meeting, but I did note a comment earlier from Mish on the KPIs for the corporate strategy might be tracking to August cabinet. So I'd suggest that I'll just sort of inquire about that after the meeting because it's not yet on the forward plan. I've also included the list of suggestions for scrutiny commission items for 2024-25. The panel suggestions are also included for information only, just so you've got that broad overview of everything across all of the scrutiny meetings. I have ranked the suggestions for scrutiny committee in priority order based on the topic criteria. The criteria and my scoring are both included in the agenda pack for your information. The committee is asked to agree which items to request for consideration during 2024-25 from that list, and or any other suggestions, noting that exact scope and timescales may be dependent on resource capacity within the different teams. And to, once those items have been agreed, to request that I, as a scrutiny officer, liaise with cabinet members and officers to schedule in those items. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice, and really thank you very much for your work on doing all the scoring on this. We really appreciate it. I'm going to first of all open for any comments or questions from the panel, and so anyone has anything? Okay, I can see Councillor Kayum first of all, and then Councillor Ottino. So if you could go first, Asima, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex, for your work on this. It looks really good. I did have a request whether if there is possibility to make amendments and suggest additional items for scrutiny. The first one, the antisocial behaviour, whether we could add that in. And I see that on your topic rating, it's one of the highest ones, as well as the report back on the leisure centre survey. So if there is possibility, I think that'd be really interesting and really good to look at, because that's come up quite a lot for me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ottino, we'll come to you and then we'll take both points together. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not totally sure I'm looking at the right bit, but the parks and green spaces management and the contracts with parks and green space management contracts with ODS. Is that something that we can ask to be, it's on one of those lists, is that something we can ask to be looked at? Because it just seems to be a complete and utter mess with the mowing of various different green spaces and whether they belong to the city council or the county council and who's paying for them. And I really would like some clarification, because there's a lot of spaces like that in my ward, and I'm not convinced anybody knows who they belong to and whether they've been cut properly or whatever. Is that something that can be talked about?
Thank you, Alice. So these two points, one's around a priority that's already there, and there's sort of endorsement of that, and the second is something that isn't listed, but would this be being addressed as part of other items in the forward plan? Or maybe is this also something that is relevant to the climate and environment panel as well, maybe given it relates to mowing? Thank you.
Yeah, so I've noted Councillor Kayum's endorsement of the antisocial behaviour item, and also noted she referenced the leisure item as well, which is actually the item that the committee agreed to get a report on in the previous item. So that's covered that way. In terms of the parks and green spaces item, so that is on the list for the climate and environment panel, because it would fall within the remit of that panel. And in terms of the grass mowing, I suppose in the first instance, I wonder if it would be helpful if I could get an update, because I think previously last year there was an update that went around to all councillors that Councillor Ottino you would have missed because you weren't sort of in office at that point. So I could try and get some clarification on that side and see if that answers the question first, and then we can take that forward to see if and where that would fit, because it would probably fall within the remit of the climate panel if it was considered somewhere. But I could try and get some clarification in the interim, see if that helps.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it is a climate issue. It's more of an antisocial behaviour issue, and people are being proud of their neighbourhoods and feeling a bit abandoned. And I mean, obviously, I'm only new, but like from my understanding, it just seems to be confusion about who is responsible, and therefore, is it the city council's budget or the county council's budget, and the different types of land. So I see it as I don't see it as a climate thing. It's more connected with people's pride in their community.
Thank you. Alice, you want to come back on this?
Yeah, so it's just so I could completely take that point. Obviously, the climate panel it's the climate and environment panel, so it does deal with those sort of environment issues as well. But I think that because I'm aware there was some communication that went out that I think might address at least part of the question that you're sort of posing. So I wonder whether if I get that clarification first and sent to you, and then we can follow it up. It'll be minuted, so we can follow it up as a matter arising at the next scrutiny committee meeting.
I mean, I haven't seen anything that actually a map would clarify things and a timetable, but yeah.
So, Councillor Ottino, just one clarification on this. So, because I think that what you've raised relates to actually 2 points. One is around the mowing, which, as we've heard from Alice, sort of relates to that specific sort of schedule, which it has previously been circulated to all councillors, but is dealt with through the other panel. But this issue around transparency of land ownership and roles and responsibilities of certain land, maybe is this a question that sort of underpins part of your concern, like who owns what in the city, and what are therefore their responsibilities to that land.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, because obviously different organisations might have different views on how to treat it, and it's just utterly confusing to the public and councillors. We have to like explain why something looks like that, and it doesn't appear to be being looked after. And I think it is completely unclear whose it is, and obviously the county council make their decision and they just pay ODS to do that. But the land that's potentially owned by the city council, I don't think it's clear enough.
Okay, so with that in mind, there was one topic on the list which refers to beneficial ownership in the city. It was actually an item that I put forward, which is relates to this wider issue of who owns a lot of the rental property in the city, and the overseas owners of property who are ultimately benefiting from the rented sector in the city. I don't think that this in itself is possibly not what you're getting at, but maybe a wider view of who owns what in the city is something that you're kind of concerned about with respect to what the city owns versus what the county owns. Is that something, maybe Alice, that we could formulate into an action item? It might not be something that requires a scrutiny, a formal scrutiny process. It's more an informational issue. Is that something that we could, as a scrutiny, request information on to be shared?
I can ask the question. I suppose just from my perspective, it's not just mowing that we're talking about here, then, because I think I gathered that it was about a mowing issue about who owns what pieces of land for mowing. But if it's a wider issue, I can sort of ask that question and find out if that data's mapped anywhere and bring that back to committee. And if it's not, we can then have a further discussion about what scrutiny may or may not want to look at.
Yeah, I can see that David's got his hand up, Councillor Henwood, but Simon, first of all, to yourself, just to clarify, does that provide a degree of reassurance for you that this has been noted?
I mean, yeah, I mean, the things that people are raising is the mowing, but obviously it's the picking up litter and just general responsibility for places. Yeah. I mean, people don't know who's responsible for the roads. They blame the city council for that, don't they? And the county council. But I think particularly on the estates, the ones that were built by the city council, there is a complete muddle of land ownership. Whilst in other places, it's probably predominantly the county council that own it. But it's very confusing.
So just one point on, and as feedback on this, I understand with the antisocial behaviour priority, which has already been referred to, and you've talked about littering as well. Yeah, I think to some of your comment gets to the heart of who's responsible for what in addressing things that are seen as antisocial behaviour, or whether that's fly tipping or littering or other things. So some of this might be addressed in that priority item. But I'll just pause here and come to Councillor Henwood, because he wants to come on this item as well. And if others do want to come back in, just also raise your hand. So Councillor Henwood, please.
Well, I think Councillor Tino has made a very good point. Many of us are unaware of whose responsibility for individual verges are. And I think if that were clarified, not necessarily through scrutiny, but made available also on the website, that would also allay any questions the public may have as well. We can direct them towards that. But again, I don't think it might be a scrutiny project.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other hands raised at this point? Councillor Tino's still got your hand raised. Is this a legacy hand or? Thank you. Okay, so in terms of then items for consideration during this municipal year and the what we've heard so far, we've got antisocial behaviour has been endorsed, I think, and I'm not hearing any dissent related to that. Any others on the list that you particularly think that have scored highly? We've got business rates, non-payment and systems management scored highly. We'd already talked about leisure services. Are we happy for this item, the business rates non-payment, to be considered by scrutiny?
I think business rates would be an excellent one to do, personally.
Thank you. Alice?
Just on that one, it's probably just worth me flagging that if the committee does want to add that to its list, it will probably be for me to consider whether that goes to the finance and performance panel or whether it's considered as part of the budget review sort of process. But I can look into that and report back to the committee.
Thank you. Well noted. Okay. And in terms of any of the others on the list, I think we're going to be seeing the adult exploitation and modern slavery item returning to us anyway. So we will be seeing that. And also tourism, I understand, will be coming to us. The other items, the annual reporting of the OIEP, which is the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership, if I recall that. And then money laundering and financial crime within the city are other items that, higher scoring. Any reflections on that? And I know Councillor Kayem has her hand up, so please to you, reflections. Thank you.
Sorry, mine's a tiny bit separate. Is under the regular standard items that aren't penciled into the current year's work plan, which is the Domestic Abuse Review Group update and the Child Poverty Review Group update. I can't see it on the topic map that Alice has done. So I was just wondering, is it normal for them to be off every couple of years, or is it just based on resourcing issues?
You want me to take that one, Councillor Miles?
Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
So they're not included in the ranking just because they're more of a regular item. So it's only the sort of one-off or suggested items that aren't regular. what has happened historically is where there's been a previous review group, sometimes the committee has wanted an update on the recommendations that they've made. Equally, sometimes they haven't. Sometimes it's, you know, it's no longer a priority area, but, you know, time moves on effectively. So it's up to the committee if they want to request any updates on recommendations made by previous review groups. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. So do if you do want an update on those, please do mention it. What about the financial crime within the city? Is that something that members feel is something that we would want to look into? Multi-agency approach to that within Oxford? Doesn't seem to be any strong opinions on that at the moment. Okay, Alice, with what we've got so far, I mean, assuming we've got enough on our web program, are you happy with the list that we've got in terms of resource requirements? Do we need to suggest others on this, or we just keep these a watching brief on the other items to bring back at future scrutiny panels? Is that?
So I think the ones I've got in a minute are the antisocial behaviour, the business rates one, leisure, adult exploitation, and tourism. So that's probably enough for me to be going on with to sort of get those scheduled in and with officers and check capacity from their perspective. And the other items, what I would normally do is keep those on the list of suggestions. So if they're not considered this year, they would go forward next year for consideration, just so we don't lose those ideas.
Brilliant. Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. Anyone else want to come in with final points before we then move on to the next item? Okay, I think everyone's getting tired now. It's getting warm. The weather's improving and we're all tired. So I'd like to then just summarise, Alice has nicely summarised just now the items that we've just cited. So thank you very much for that. So the key priority, first of all, will be the antisocial behaviour based on this in terms of our scrutiny commissioned items. At this point, then we'll move on to item 10, which is item 6 in the agenda pack, report back on recommendations from scrutiny panel meetings. I think you will have seen the feedback around some of this. One thing I'd like to just say up front is that what some of the other panels have been doing is having a recommendation tracker, summarising where recommendations have been accepted and are not overall for a particular committee. The climate panel has that, and it just keeps a little summary ticking over. It's very high level, and I would like to suggest that we adopt this same approach because I think it will make our lives easier. So unless anyone disagrees with that, hopefully that's something that Alice could take away. Let's see any. Okay, Alice, would you like to clarify on this point? Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to check the timescale. So would the committee be happy if I sort of go back to the recommendations made from 23-24 and then do all recommendations from that time period going forward?
That sounds reasonable. I can see some nodding of heads. We don't want to overburden you with this, and that makes practical sense. Thank you. So, Alice, just before we close this item, I think in terms of the recommendations, would you like to just summarise the report back on the climate environment panel that we had on the 11th of June? We don't have to go into all of the details. But
yeah, of course. And just as well, if I may, I've just got a quick update on a question that was asked about the company scrutiny arrangements last time. There was a query about whether scrutiny would still have a standing invite to shareholder and joint venture group meetings. So it's just to say I have engaged with the head of law and governance, and the exact arrangements are still being finalised. But effectively, yes, scrutiny will continue to have invites in the same way that scrutiny does to cabinet for those recommendations. They will have an open invite to come and attend to observe without speaking rights, but that could be revoked if the shareholder needs to discuss confidential items, and that would be on a case-by-case basis. But just to reassure scrutiny that there is still that opportunity for observing those meetings.
Thank you. Yeah, I see Councillor Cram's hand raised. I just in case she wants to come back on this point, or would you like to just speak? Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Sorry, Alice, it's not on the point that you just mentioned, but it's in this item. I hope it's okay for me just to ask, under the the adult exploitation training recommendation. I just wanted to ask whether that's mandatory or at least mandatory for new councillors and whether that amendment can be made or requested.
I don't think, because the recommendation's already been made, I don't think that we can go back and amend that at this stage. The committee at the time didn't make it mandatory, but I think there was the hope that, you know, there was a lot of support from members for this training to take place, so it would form part of the suite of optional training that does occur. But we do tend to get quite good engagement and attendance, so I suppose it'd be a case of members encouraging each other to attend where possible, and they do tend to be recorded as well. But you know, if the date really doesn't work, so yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. And I think just on this, because we're going to get this topic coming back to us during this municipal year, then please, I mean, maybe Alice, just make a note that there has been this interest in making it mandatory, that perhaps we can discuss when we get to that stage at a later date, so we don't forget that concern that you've raised, that there's not a requirement there. Alice, back to you on the recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So the Climate and Environment panel met on the 11th of June. The panel wanted to thank Cabinet members and officers for attending to present and answer questions. Alongside its work plan for the year, the panel considered substantive reports on the tree management policy, framework for the installation of renewable technologies in council-owned properties, and the HRA energy efficiency projects for 2024-25. There was a lot of wide-ranging discussion, culminating in the formulation of 9 recommendations to the Cabinet on the tree management policy and the framework items, which were submitted to June Cabinet, and responses are set out in your agenda packs for your information. Broadly speaking, the tree management policy recommendations related to things like proximity of replacement trees to location of felled trees, clarity and cross-referencing between documents on the council's overall approach to tree planting, the management of conflicts between existing trees and hard surfaces such as pavements, recognising the need to work in partnership on street tree issues such as with the county highways, contextualising the number of council-owned street trees within the policy, the council's commitment to encouraging local residents and groups to come forward with proposals for tree planting and maintenance, incentivising trees on private land through council policies, particularly in relation to HMOs and selective licensing, and recognising the importance of mature trees within the policy. And then on the framework item, there was one recommendation around encouraging the submission of bids from suppliers who are representative of the population of Oxford, sort of encouraging that inclusive green growth in particular. So that's sort of whistle-stop tour of Climate and Environment panel.
Thank you, Alice. Unless there are any questions on that, and I think we're going to draw to a close. Thank you for your work on that panel and the other panels in between. We really appreciate all your work, Alice, also preparing us for this meeting and also the future ones. So we then get to this final agenda item, which is dates of the future meetings. So I just want you to note the future dates of this. As has already been mentioned, there's no business for committee meetings scheduled in August, but Alice is going to clarify around these KPI for the corporate strategy. So I think at the moment, I'd like to ask the committee if they are minded to cancel the August meeting unless there is this KPI discussion that needs to be addressed. Any views around that? Because I think I guess any cancellation would be subject to Alice's clarification on the progress of these KPIs. But if that weren't coming to Cabinet, are we okay to cancel the August meeting?
That's okay with me.
Yeah, good, thank you. I can see some nods of heads, so hopefully, just again, if you ever disagree with anything that is being said at a time when we think that we're getting towards consensus, don't forget you can just unmute yourself and give us a shout out. We just please do not sit there in silence when you disagree with something. So thank you very much. At this point then, unless there are any final points from Alice, anything else on your side? No? Okay, well, really thank you to everyone for your hard work and contributions this evening. Thank you to Alice and Celeste for sitting with us and preparing us and being here. So we look forward to speaking at the next meeting. We'll hear a confirmation about August if it does take place, but otherwise we assume it isn't. And thank you for your time this evening.